sodium lights hummed like a dying heartbeat, two of them, mounted on rusted poles at the edge of a concrete island the time had forgotten. They flickered in an unsteady rhythm, casting yellow pools of light across cracked asphalt and faded pump stations. One blinked twice, held steady for 3 seconds, then stuttered again as if the bulb itself was trying to decide whether to give up entirely. Route 19 stretched in both directions, like a scar across the New Mexico desert. No headlights for miles. No sound except the occasional whisper of wind pushing sand across the highway, and the low electrical buzz of those dying lamps. The chevron sign above the station had lost 3 letters years ago. Now it just read CEVN, glowing a sickly orange against the purple-black sky. The time was 22:37, too late for families driving home from weekend trips, too early for the truckers who preferred the interstate 40 miles east. This was the hour when gas stations like this one became invisible, forgotten waypoints between somewhere and nowhere, staffed by men who had stopped asking questions long ago. Inside the bulletproof booth, Walter Briggs sat with his boots crossed on a plastic milk crate, reading a Louis L'Amour paperback he had already finished 6 times. The pages were soft as cloth, now edges worn smooth by calloused thumbs. He did not need to read the words anymore. He just liked the weight of it in his hands, the familiar rhythm of sentences he could recite from memory. 62 years old. Salt and pepper beard trimmed short in the way that never quite leaves a Marine, even 30 years after discharge. His friends, the few who were still alive, called him Stonewall, a nickname earned in Kuwait, February 1991, when his convoy took fire for 6 hours on Highway 80, and he refused to abandon 3 wounded men in a burning Humvee. The Bronze Star hanging on the wall behind him did not tell that story. Neither did the photograph beside it, 18 young men in desert camouflage, squinting against the Sun M16s, propped against their hips. Only 4 of them had made it home whole. The Remington 870 mounted beneath the counter was loaded with 5 shells of double-aught buckshot. He checked it every morning, not because he expected trouble, because 30 years of combat had taught him that trouble rarely announced itself before arriving. He heard the car before he saw it, a low rumble of an engine that needed new bearings, tires, crunching over gravel and sand as it pulled off the highway. Stonewall did not look up from his book. He had learned to read vehicles the way other men read faces. This one was wounded something in the suspension, maybe a cracked axle mount, moving slow but deliberate, not lost, not looking for directions, looking for something else. He turned a page he was not reading and waited. The headlights swept across the pumps, briefly illuminating a dust devil that had formed near the air station, then died as the engine cut. A dark sedan, domestic, probably 10 years old. The kind of car that was invisible in parking lots and forgettable on highways. The kind of car that people chose when they did not want to be remembered. One door opened, one figure stepped out, and Stonewall Briggs felt something shift in his chest, a tightness he had not experienced in years. Not fear, recognition. She moved like water finding its level. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Each step placed with the unconscious precision of someone who had learned through blood and repetition exactly how much sound a boot made on different surfaces. Gravel, concrete, tile. She knew them all. Her weight stayed centered, shoulders loose but ready, arms swinging just enough to appear natural while remaining close to her body's core. Stonewall had seen that walk before, on young men fresh from Coronado and Fort Bragg before the desert stripped away their confidence. On older operators who had done things that would never appear in any official report. On the faces in his photograph, the ones who had not made it home. She was maybe 5'7", lean but not thin. The kind of muscle that came from functional training, not gym mirrors. Black tactical pants tucked into boots that had seen hard use. A civilian windbreaker zipped to the collar, dark enough to disappear in shadows. Ball cap pulled low over her forehead, brim curved tight, hiding her eyes from the overhead cameras she had certainly already located. No jewelry except for a rubber wristband half tucked beneath her sleeve. No rings, no watch with a reflective face, nothing that could catch light or make noise at the wrong moment. Stonewall noticed these details because noticing details had kept him breathing when other men stopped. The bell above the door chimed once as she entered. A tired sound, like even the bell had given up, expecting anything interesting to happen. She did not look at him, not directly, but he felt her awareness sweep the room like a searchlight, cataloging exits, angles, distances. The door behind her still swinging closed. The hallway to the restrooms on her left. The emergency exit beside the beer coolers, locked with a push bar that would trigger an alarm. The counter where he sat, bulletproof glass between them. Cash drawer to his right, security monitors, showing grainy feeds of the pumps outside. She processed all of it in the time it took her to walk 4 steps. Then she moved toward the back cooler, selected a single bottle of water, and returned to the counter without a word. Stonewall marked his page with a gas receipt and looked up. Green eyes, pale, almost gray in the fluorescent light. No makeup, no attempt to soften the angles of a face that had been shaped by discipline and deprivation. Late 20s, maybe. Young enough to be his granddaughter. Old enough to have seen things that would break most men twice her age. She placed the bottle on the counter, exact change already in her other hand. $3.25 separated into neat stacks, quarters, dimes, a single nickel. No fumbling, no searching through pockets. She had counted it before she walked in. "That it?" Stonewall asked. She nodded. He rang it up. The register beeped twice. He slid the change into the drawer and pushed the bottle toward her, but he did not let go. Not yet. "The way you walk," he said quietly. "Only people who have carried 80 pounds through sand move like that." "But R.S." She did not answer. Her expression did not change. But something flickered in those gray-green eyes. A micro-expression that lasted less than a second. Not surprise, she was too controlled for surprise. Acknowledgement. Recognition of a kindred spirit. Stonewall released the bottle. "Thought so," he said. She took the water and turned toward the door. The bell was still settling from her entrance when headlights swept across the windows again, brighter this time, moving faster. A silver Ford with aftermarket rims and a cracked rear bumper pulled into the lot and stopped at an angle that blocked the exit. The engine did not cut, just idled low and rumbling like an animal deciding whether to pounce. Stonewall's hand drifted toward the Remington. The woman in the windbreaker stopped walking. She did not turn around, did not look toward the window, but her weight shifted almost imperceptibly back. Foot adjusting shoulders, dropping a quarter-inch center of gravity, lowering. She had seen the car before it arrived. Stonewall realized that now. She had registered it when she first pulled in, noted the distance between the door and the vehicle, calculated response times and angles of engagement. And she had walked into his store anyway, which meant she had already decided what she was willing to do if those doors opened. The driver's door swung wide. A man stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. Stonewall could not hear the words, but he watched the man's lips move, saw the sharp nod of confirmation. "Target confirmed. Proceeding." The man ended the call and slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. This was not random. This was not robbery. This was something else entirely. 2 men stepped out of the Ford. The first one was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3". Close-shaved head, deep-set eyes, the kind of crow's feet that came from squinting against harsh sun in places where shade meant the difference between life and death. Denim jacket with frayed cuffs, collar, torn where a tag had been ripped away. He moved with the sideways lean of someone who had tested boundaries in places like this, before gas stations, convenience stores, anywhere, with fluorescent lights and a tired cashier who would not ask questions. But there was something else in his movement, something disciplined beneath the casual menace. The set of his shoulders, the way he kept his hands visible, but ready, the unconscious habit of scanning corners before entering doorways. Training, old training, maybe degraded by years of neglect, but still there. The second man was younger. Narrow-faced, nervous, hoodie unzipped over a shirt that had not seen detergent in a week. His hands stayed in his pockets, not from cold, but from uncertainty. He followed the tall one like a shadow, matching his pace, letting him lead. Subordinate, along for the ride. Maybe not fully understanding what ride he was on. The bell chimed again as they entered. The woman did not move. She stood 4 feet from the door, bottle of water in her left-hand body, angled so she could see both men without turning her head. The position looked casual. It was not. She had placed herself precisely between the 2 potential threats and the only unobstructed exit, the emergency door beside the coolers. If things escalated, she had a clear line of retreat. if she chose to retreat. Stonewall did not think she would. The tall man clocked her immediately. His eyes moved up and down, assessing, categorizing. Then he smiled, a slow, deliberate expression that did not reach his eyes. "Late night," he said. She did not respond. "You hear me?" He stepped closer, cutting the distance between them in half. "I said late night. Being polite here." The younger one circled slightly to her right, not threatening, not touching, just closing space. Narrowing options. The kind of movement that spoke to experience, even if the experience was cruel. The woman's eyes tracked him without her head moving. Then they returned to the tall one. "You don't talk much," he said. "That's okay. I like that in a woman." Behind the counter, Stonewall's fingers brushed the stock of the Remington. He had seen this dance before. In bars outside Camp Pendleton. In alleys behind honky-tonks in Oceanside. Two predators circling what they thought was prey, testing for weakness, waiting for fear. They did not know what they were circling. "Come on," the tall one pressed. "You could at least smile. You'd look good if you smiled." She tilted her head slightly, a fraction of an inch, and when she spoke, her voice was low and precise. The voice of someone who only opened her mouth when silence would not cut deep enough. "I wasn't aiming to," the younger one scoffed. "She thinks she's funny." "No." The tall one stepped closer still, close enough that Stonewall could see the tension in his jaw, the way his right hand had drifted toward the inside of his jacket. "She thinks she's safe." The word hung in the air like smoke, and the woman's expression did not change. Not her eyes, not her jaw, not even the rhythm of her breathing. She simply looked at him the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray, analyzing structure, identifying weakness, calculating the most efficient path to resolution. The tall man did not like that. Stonewall could see it in the way his posture stiffened, the slight tremor in his trigger hand. He was used to women who flinched, women who begged, women who gave him the reaction his ego required to feel powerful. This woman gave him nothing, and nothing was the most dangerous thing she could have given him. "You know what?" He smiled again, but the expression had changed. Harder now. Meaner. "I don't think you understand the situation here." His hand moved, smooth and practiced. Not waved, not brandished, just drawn from inside his jacket with the economy of motion that came from repetition. A Glock 19, polymer frame matte black. Finish, slide tension, slightly worn from use. He held it low at first, muzzle angled toward her midsection wrist, tucked against his stomach, not quite pointing at her, not quite threatening, just present. "There," he said. "Now we understand each other." Stonewall's hand closed around the Remington's grip. He did not pull it yet, did not want to escalate if there was still a chance this ended without blood. But his thumb found the safety, and his breathing slowed the way it always did before action. The woman had not moved. She looked at the Glock the way she might look at a crossword puzzle, with mild interest and complete confidence that she already knew the answer. Her eyes traced the weapon's lines, the angle of his grip, the position of his finger relative to the trigger guard. He was not inside the guard. Index finger hovering alongside it the way someone who had watched too many movies thought was a safety measure. It was not. It just meant his first shot would be slow, a half-second delay, while his finger found the trigger. Maybe more if his grip shifted under stress. His feet were too wide apart. Weight distributed unevenly, left heel bearing more load than right. Knees locked instead of bent. Center of gravity too high. One solid push to his left side, and he would overcorrect by instinct, pivoting away from the threat, opening his wrist to easy manipulation. The younger one had moved again, drifting to a position 40 degrees off her right shoulder. She had not looked, but she knew. She had mapped their positions within 5 seconds of their entry. She had been mapping positions since she was 19 years old. The tall man stepped forward again. The last 3 feet between them disappeared, and then the muzzle touched her chest. Light pressure, like a button being pressed. He held it there, watching her face for the reaction he craved. "I'm not here to rob the place," he said lazily. "Just don't like being ignored." She exhaled, slow, controlled. A thin fog formed between them in the cold air. "You know what people usually say when they've got a gun in their face?" he asked. She did not answer. His smile widened, teeth too white under the fluorescent lights. "Any last words?" That's the cliché, right? So I'm asking. He tilted the Glock, bringing the muzzle up from her chest to her chin. Not pressed hard, just placed there like punctuation at the end of a sentence. Any last words? And for the first time since she had walked through the door, something changed in her expression. Not fear, not tension. Something else. Something the tall man could not name but could feel crawling up his spine like ice water. Her eyes had not left his. They had not blinked. And now they held something that made him press the Glock harder against her chin, as if pressure could force out the reaction he wanted. It did not, because she was not looking at the gun. She was looking through it, to the inside of his jacket where the faded edge of a tattoo was visible above his collar. Black ink military style, letters and numbers arranged in a pattern she recognized immediately. K9 Unit, Blackwater. Syria 2023. Her memory provided the rest. A night in Aleppo. Hot wind carrying the smell of burning diesel. A compound they were never supposed to enter based on intelligence that was never supposed to be wrong. 3 SEALs and 3 Blackwater contractors moving through corridors that should have been empty and were not. Muzzle flashes in the darkness, screaming in Arabic and English, the wet sound of rounds hitting flesh, and Danny Slade, 6'1", broad shoulders, the kind of laugh that could fill a room lying in a doorway, with his hand pressed against his stomach, trying to hold in what was already spilling out. Danny had been one of the Blackwater contractors assigned to support her team. Not officially under her command, but following her lead nonetheless. He had trusted her, and she had led him into a trap. "Kira," he had whispered, "the intel was wrong. Someone sold us out." She had stayed with him until his eyes went empty. 23 minutes that felt like 23 years. And when she finally carried his body to the extraction point, she had made a promise to find out who had sent them into that trap. 6 months later, she was still looking. And now a man with a Blackwater tattoo had a gun to her chin, asking if she had any last words. She almost smiled. "Danny Slade," she said quietly. "He was your brother." The tall man's face went white. The transformation was instant and complete. His confident sneer collapsed, replaced by something raw and uncontrolled. His hand trembled, making the Glock shake against her chin. "How?" He swallowed hard. "How the fuck do you know that name?" "Because I was there when he died." 3 seconds of absolute silence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The younger man had frozen near the snack aisle, his nervous energy replaced by genuine fear. He did not understand what was happening, but he understood that the ground had shifted beneath them. Behind the counter, Stonewall's thumb moved the Remington safety to the off position. The click was barely audible, but the woman heard it. She did not react, did not even glance in his direction, but she knew. She had an ally now. A variable that changed her calculations. The tall man Brennan Slade, she now knew, brother of the man who had bled out in her arms, pressed the gun harder against her chin. But the gesture was desperate now. Compensation for the control he had already lost. "You," his voice cracked. "You're the team leader, the one who led them into that building." "I led them in. I didn't choose the target." "Bullshit." The word came out as a snarl. "You were in command. You gave the order. Danny trusted you, and you got him killed." She let him talk. Let him expel the rage he had been carrying for 18 months, the grief he had converted into hatred, because hatred was easier than helplessness. She understood that conversion. She had made it herself many times, but she also knew something he did not. "Your brother didn't die because of my orders," she said, voice steady. "He died because someone at DIA gave us false intelligence. Someone who knew we were walking into an ambush and sent us anyway." Brennan shook his head. "You're lying. You're trying to—" "His name is Colonel Ashcroft, call sign Spectre. He ran the Syria desk for Defense Intelligence from 2019 to 2024. The operation that killed your brother was designated Silent Protocol, and it was compromised from the start." She watched his face as the words landed. Watched the conflict between his need for a simple enemy and the terrible possibility that she was telling the truth. His hand shook harder. The Glock's muzzle scraped against her chin, drawing a thin line of pain. She did not flinch. "I've spent 6 months looking for proof," she continued. 6 months trying to find out who sold Danny's position, to the people who killed him. And I'm getting close. Close enough that someone wants me dead. Brennan's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying this isn't a coincidence. She tilted her head slightly, indicating the gas station, the empty highway, the hour. Someone told you I would be here. Someone gave you my location. His face changed again, doubt creeping in, eroding the certainty that had driven him into this confrontation. I got a tip, he admitted. Anonymous. Said the woman who killed Danny would be at this gas station tonight. Said I could get justice. Justice! She almost laughed. You were pointed at me like a weapon. Someone wanted you to pull the trigger so they wouldn't have to. That's... He stopped, swallowed. The Glock wavered. From behind her, the younger man Decker Finch, she would learn later, spoke for the first time in minutes. His voice was high-scared. Brennan, what the hell is going on? You said this was just intimidation. You said we were just going to scare her, get some information. You didn't say anything about, shut up, Decker. No, man, this is fucked. She's talking about the government, about conspiracies. I didn't sign up for this shit. I said, shut up. Brennan's attention split. For half a second, his eyes moved toward his partner. His head turned slightly, his grip on the Glock shifted. Behind the counter, Stonewall rose to his feet, Remington 870 in his hands, barrel leveled at the space between Brennan's shoulder blades. Son? His voice was quiet but carried the weight of 30 years of combat experience. I've seen enough killing in Kuwait to last 3 lifetimes. Put the weapon down before this goes somewhere none of us can come back from. Brennan froze. The Glock still pointed vaguely toward the woman, but his attention was fractured, now split between her, the door where Decker was backing away, and the old man with the shotgun who had materialized like a ghost from behind the counter. Mexican standoff. 3 people, 2 guns, and a decision that would determine whether anyone walked out of this building alive. The woman still had not moved, but something in her posture had changed. A subtle shift in her weight, a slight rotation of her shoulders. She was no longer in a defensive position. She was coiled, ready, waiting for the window that she knew would come. Brennan's phone rang. The sound shattered the tension like a hammer through glass. A harsh electronic tone, too loud in the quiet store. Brennan flinched, actually flinched, and for a moment his attention fractured again. The woman still did not move. Brennan pulled the phone from his pocket with his left hand, keeping the Glock steady with his right. He glanced at the screen. His face went pale. Answer it, the woman said. He did. The voice that came through the speaker was cold and precise. The voice of someone accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. The voice of someone who had never had to explain himself to anyone beneath his rank. Sergeant Slade, you're running out of time. Brennan's jaw clenched. I'm handling it. No, you're talking. Talking wasn't part of the arrangement. A pause. Complete the mission, Sergeant. Now. The mission was to get answers, to find out what happened to Danny. The mission was to eliminate a security risk. The woman in front of you has classified information that cannot be allowed to reach the wrong hands. Complete the mission or suffer the consequences. Brennan's hand tightened on the phone. What consequences? Your wife is named Sarah. Your daughter is named Emma. They live at 742 Pinewood Drive in Fayetteville, just outside Fort Bragg. Nice neighborhood. Good schools. It would be a shame if something happened to them tonight. All the color drained from Brennan's face. The woman heard every word. The speaker was not on, but her hearing was sharp, and Brennan had the volume turned high. She filed the information away, names, address, threat, and added it to the calculations already running in her mind. Colonel Ashcroft. Spectre. She knew that voice, had heard it in briefings and after-action reports and the cold assessments that reduced human lives to acceptable losses and strategic necessities. He was real. He was listening, and he had orchestrated this entire confrontation. She was not the hunter anymore. She was the hunted, and the man with the gun to her chin was just another weapon aimed at her by someone who preferred to keep his hands clean. Brennan lowered the phone. His eyes met hers, and she saw the truth written in them. He was trapped, caught between his grief for his brother, his fear for his family, and the growing suspicion that he had been manipulated from the start. I don't have a choice, he whispered. Everyone has a choice, she said. Your brother knew that. He chose to trust me with his last words instead of using them to curse me. He chose to think about your future instead of his past. The moment stretched like rubber pulled to breaking point. Brennan's phone had gone silent. The threat delivered, the countdown begun. His hand trembled on the Glock, caught between the woman who claimed innocence and the voice that held his family hostage. "Put it down," Kira said quietly. "Whatever Ashcroft told you, whatever he promised, it was a lie. You're a weapon to him, nothing more. My wife, my daughter. If he was going to hurt them, he would have done it already. They're leverage, not targets. The moment you're no longer useful, they become irrelevant." She held his gaze. "But if you kill me here, you'll never know the truth. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you murdered an innocent woman for a man who got your brother killed." His hand wavered. "I have proof," she continued. "Not here, but accessible. Documents that show exactly what Ashcroft did in Syria. Names, dates, orders. Everything you need to know who really killed Danny. Why should I believe you? Because I could have taken that gun from you 60 seconds ago. I didn't. Because I need you to understand what's really happening here." She paused. "And because your brother deserved better than to be forgotten as collateral damage in someone else's war." Brennan's face crumpled. The Glock lowered inch by inch until the muzzle pointed at the floor. "I want to see the proof." "You will, but first we need to—" That was when the windows exploded. Glass erupted across the store like frozen rain. A black SUV with no plates crashed through the front of the building at 40 miles per hour, shattering the reinforced panes into 1,000 crystalline fragments that scattered across tile floors and metal shelving. The vehicle's momentum carried it through the entrance, crushing the doorframe, obliterating a rack of road maps and travel magazines, before the front bumper slammed into the base of the checkout counter with a sound like a thunderclap. Stonewall was thrown backward. The impact knocked the Remington from his hands and sent him crashing into the wall of cigarettes behind him, cartons raining down around his shoulders as he slumped to the floor. Blood appeared at his temple where his head had struck the edge of a shelf. Brennan's Slade stumbled sideways, the Glock discharging once into the ceiling as his finger convulsed on the trigger. Foam tiles erupted in a shower of white dust. He hit a display of motor oil and went down, hard bottles scattering across the floor like bowling pins. But Kira Vance did not stumble. In the half-second between the sound of breaking glass and the SUV's impact, she had already moved. Not away from the danger, but toward it, using the chaos as cover her body, dropping low as she rolled behind a shelving unit stacked with canned goods. The metal frame absorbed the spray of debris that would have shredded her face. She came up in a crouch, eyes scanning through the dust and settling glass. The SUV's engine was still running. Steam hissed from its crumpled hood. Through the spider-webbed windshield, she could see the driver slumped against the steering wheel, either unconscious or dead from the impact. But the passenger door was already opening, and a figure in black tactical gear was stepping out with a suppressed MP5 raised to his shoulder. Professional. The way he moved told her everything. Smooth transitions, weapon-up muzzle tracking toward the last known position of his target. He wore a balaclava and no identifying patches. Private military. The kind of operator who took contracts that did not exist on paper. She had worked alongside men like him. She had killed men like him. The operator swept his weapon across the debris field, searching for movement. His partner was emerging from the back seat, now similarly equipped, covering the angles his teammate could not see. Two-man fire team. Standard room clearing protocol. They expected to find bodies, not resistance. They had underestimated the situation. Kira moved. She grabbed a can of beans from the shelf beside her and hurled it across the store. It struck a display of windshield wiper fluid, with a crash drawing both operators' attention for a critical half-second. In that window, she burst from cover and closed the distance to the first man in 3 strides. He was good. Fast enough to begin turning toward her, fast enough to start bringing the MP5 around. But fast was not enough when you were fighting someone who had spent 9 years training to be faster. Her left hand shot out and trapped the weapon's barrel, forcing it down and away. Her right palm struck the base of his chin with enough force to snap his head back and send a shockwave through his brainstem. His eyes rolled white, his knees buckled. She stripped the MP5 from his grip before he hit the ground and used his falling body as a shield against his partner. The second operator fired. 3 rounds suppressed, sounding like aggressive coughs in the chaos of the wrecked store. Two hit the body she was holding, one passed close enough to her ear that she felt the heat of its passage. She dropped the body and the MP5 simultaneously diving behind the SUV's open passenger door as the operator adjusted his aim. Rounds punched through the door's sheet metal, but she was already moving again, using the vehicle's mass as temporary cover while she circled toward his flank. He tracked her movement, pivoting smoothly. Professional, disciplined. The kind of operator who did not panic when plans fell apart. But he was also predictable. She had trained with men like him, knew the doctrines they followed, the patterns they fell into when operating on instinct. He would expect her to break right toward the relative cover of the checkout counter. He would pre-aim that direction, waiting for her to appear. She broke left instead, came around the front of the SUV directly into his field of fire, but faster than he could adjust. His muzzle was pointed at empty space when she reached him. Her forearm slammed across his weapon, driving it down. Her knee came up into his thigh, deadening the muscle buckling his stance. Her elbow found his throat. He gagged, staggered backward. She did not give him time to recover. Two strikes to his weapon hand broke his grip. A sweep took his legs out from under him. He hit the tile floor hard, and before he could rise, her boot was on his chest. The MP5 she had taken from his partner pressed against his forehead. 5 seconds, maybe 6. Two operators neutralized. She was not even breathing hard. Behind her, she heard movement. Stonewall pulling himself up from behind the wrecked counter. Blood ran down the side of his face, but his eyes were clear, alert. He had found the Remington again. Brennan Slade was on his knees near the motor oil display, the Glock still in his hand but pointed at the floor. He looked dazed, overwhelmed. The violence had happened too fast for him to process. He had come here expecting to intimidate a woman with a gun. He had not expected a war zone. Kira kept her boot on the downed operator's chest and scanned the parking lot through the shattered windows. The black SUV was the only vehicle visible. No backup, no second wave. Whoever had sent these men had expected 2 professionals to be sufficient. They had been wrong. The man beneath her boot was trying to speak. Choking sounds, throat damage from her elbow strike. She eased the pressure slightly. "Who sent you?" He shook his head. Loyalty or fear, she could not tell which. She pressed the MP5's muzzle harder against his forehead. "I'm going to ask once more. Then I'm going to start with your kneecaps and work my way up. Who sent you?" Something in her voice convinced him, the same flat certainty that had convinced men in darker places to tell her things they had sworn to take to their graves. "Spectre," he rasped. "Colonel Ashcroft. We were his cleanup team." She had known, but hearing it confirmed sent a cold wave through her chest. Ashcroft had sent Brennan to kill her. When that failed, he had sent professionals. The man was thorough. She had to give him that. "The police will be here soon," Stonewall said from his position by the wrecked counter. "Gunshots car through a building. Someone will have called it in." She looked at him, then at Brennan, then at the destruction around them. "I need to go," she said, "before this becomes official." Stonewall nodded slowly. His eyes moved from her to Brennan and back again. "Take him with you." Brennan's head snapped up. "What?" "Son, you came here to kill her. Now you know the truth. The man who got your brother killed just tried to kill both of you." Stonewall's voice was hard. "You can stay here and explain all this to the county sheriff, or you can go with her and do something about it." Brennan looked at the bodies on the floor, at the wrecked SUV, at the woman who had just killed 2 trained operators in less time than it took most people to tie their shoes. "Danny talked about you," he said finally, "in his letters home. Said you were the best operator he'd ever worked with. Said he'd follow you into hell if you asked." "I never asked him to die." "I know." Brennan's voice cracked slightly. "I know that now." He rose to his feet and holstered the Glock. "Where are we going?" She looked at Stonewall. The old Marine reached beneath the counter and pulled out something she had not noticed before, a folded map, old and worn, covered in handwritten annotations. "Sangre de Cristo Mountains," he said. "I know those mountains. There's an old mining facility abandoned in the 70s. The government bought it through shell companies years ago. If Ashcroft has a black site in this region, that's where it is." She took the map. Their fingers brushed, and she felt the calluses on his hands, the same calluses that marked her own, the marks of people who had spent their lives holding weapons. "Why are you helping me?" Stonewall glanced at the photograph on the wall. 18 young men in desert camouflage squinting against the sun. 1991, Highway of Death. We got hit by friendly fire from an A-10. 8 of my men died because an intelligence officer falsified targeting data to cover his own mistake. His voice was steady, but something moved behind his eyes. Man named Ashcroft. Captain Ashcroft back then. Kira went still. He's been doing this for 30 years, Stonewall continued. Getting good people killed and walking away clean. I never got my justice. He met her eyes. Maybe you can get yours. Sirens in the distance. Getting closer. Go, Stonewall said. I'll handle the police. Tell them it was a robbery gone wrong. 2 men both dead now. A good Samaritan helped me and left before I could get her name. She nodded. It was not a perfect cover story, but it would hold long enough for her to reach the compound. By the time anyone started asking serious questions, this would all be over. One way or another. She moved toward the back of the store, toward the emergency exit that led to the rear parking lot. Brennan followed. At the door, she paused and looked back at Stonewall. If I don't come back, there's a file on a secure server. The access code is Trident 7 November. It contains everything I've gathered about Ashcroft and Silent Protocol. Make sure it reaches someone who can use it. Stonewall met her eyes. Come back, he said. She did not answer. Could not make a promise she might not be able to keep. The emergency exit opened onto a narrow strip of cracked asphalt behind the gas station. Her car was still parked where she had left it, untouched by the violence inside. She moved toward it quickly, Brennan at her heels. We'll take my vehicle, she said. Yours is blocked by the SUV. He did not argue. She slid behind the wheel and started the engine. Brennan dropped into the passenger seat, still processing everything that had happened. The sedan pulled out of the back lot and turned north, away from the approaching sirens, away from the destruction. Toward the mountains, toward Ashcroft, toward whatever waited at the end of this road. In the rearview mirror, the gas station's dying sodium lights flickered once more, then disappeared around a curve. The hunt had begun. The highway stretched north like a black ribbon through the desert. Kira pushed the sedan hard, speedometer hovering at 85 as the headlights carved tunnels through the darkness. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose ahead of them, their peaks invisible against the star-scattered sky. But their presence felt in the way the road began to climb, the way the air grew thinner and colder with each passing mile. Brennan sat in the passenger seat, silent. His hands rested on his thighs, palms down, fingers still. The posture of a man trying to hold himself together through sheer force of will. Every few minutes he would glance at her, then look away, processing the cascade of revelations that had upended everything he thought he knew. She let him have his silence. There would be time for questions later. The dashboard clock read 23:19, less than an hour since she had walked into Stonewall's gas station for a bottle of water. Less than an hour since a man had pressed a gun to her chin and asked for her last words. The world could change that fast. She had learned that lesson in Syria, learned it again tonight. Tell me about the operation, Brennan said finally. His voice was hoarse. The real story, not the official version. She did not look at him, kept her eyes on the road, her hands steady on the wheel. We were tasked with extracting an asset, a Syrian engineer named Farid Qassem, who had been feeding us intelligence on chemical weapons facilities. High-value target, the kind of source that could shift the balance of the entire conflict. She shifted gears as the road steepened. The extraction point was a compound in East Aleppo, industrial area mostly abandoned. Our intel said minimal resistance. Maybe 2 or 3 guards, local militia, poorly trained and poorly equipped. But the intel was wrong. The intel was a lie. Her jaw tightened. We went in with a 6-person team, 3 SEALs and 3 Blackwater contractors. Danny was one of the contractors. Best operator I ever worked with, who didn't wear a trident. He had instincts you couldn't teach. Knew when something was wrong before anyone else could feel it. She paused, remembering. The weight of it pressed against her chest like a stone. He tried to warn me. An hour before insertion, he pulled me aside. Said he had a bad feeling. Said his contacts in the contractor network had heard whispers that our mission was compromised. I reported it up the chain, asked for confirmation on the intel. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Command said the source was solid. Said we were green-lit for insertion, so we went. And walked into an ambush. 15 hostiles. Fortified positions, heavy weapons. They knew exactly when we were coming and exactly where we would enter. The moment we breached the compound, they opened up from 3 directions. She exhaled slowly. We lost Henderson in the first 10 seconds. Martinez 30 seconds later. I took a round in the shoulder but kept moving. Danny was covering our 6 when they flanked us from the east corridor. Brennan's hands had curled into fists. The letters he sent home never mentioned any of this. He just said it was routine security work. Contractors don't talk about operations. Neither do we. Officially, that night never happened. There's no record of silent protocol in any database you could access. No after-action report, no casualty documentation, no acknowledgement that Fareed Qassem ever existed. She glanced at him. But I kept my own records. And I've spent 6 months tracking down everyone who touched that operation, trying to find the source of the leak. And you found Ashcroft. I found a pattern. Every operation he ran had the same signature. Assets compromised, operators killed, evidence buried. Kuwait in 91, Somalia in 93, Iraq in 2007, Syria in 2023. Different wars, different decades, same result. Good people dying because someone at the top decided they were expendable. The road curved sharply and she downshifted tires, gripping asphalt as they navigated the turn. Beyond the headlights, the mountains rose like black giants against the star-filled sky. Danny knew, Brennan said quietly. That's what he meant in the doorway, when he said the intel was wrong. He figured it out faster than any of us. He had contacts from his contractor days, people who worked in intelligence. One of them told him the mission was compromised before we even left the staging area. Her jaw tightened. He tried to warn command, but someone shut him down. Someone who didn't want questions asked. And you think that someone was Ashcroft? I know it was Ashcroft. I just can't prove it yet. She paused. But the proof exists. He keeps physical records of his operations, files that never touch a computer network. If I can get to those files, I can expose everything. Where? The compound we're heading to. An old mining facility in the Sangre de Cristo range. The government bought it through shell companies in the 80s, converted it into a black site for operations that couldn't exist on any official record. Ashcroft has been using it as his personal headquarters for years. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he asked the question she had been waiting for. Why didn't you tell anyone after Syria, after you knew something was wrong? Why didn't you go public with the word of a wounded operator against a decorated colonel with 30 years of service and connections in every intelligence agency in the country? I had no proof, no witnesses, nothing but suspicions and a dead team. She shook her head. I tried going through channels, filed reports, requested investigations, pushed for answers. Every door I knocked on got slammed in my face. Ashcroft has friends everywhere, the kind of friends who make problems disappear. So you went off the grid. I took my discharge and dropped off the map, started building my own case one piece at a time, tracking down survivors of his other operations, collecting testimony, following money trails. She glanced at him. I was getting close enough that he decided I needed to be eliminated. That's why he sent me. You were a convenient weapon, someone with a personal grudge and military training. If you had killed me at that gas station, it would have looked like a revenge killing, a grieving brother settling a score. No connection to Ashcroft, no trail to follow. Brennan's jaw tightened. And when I failed, he sent the professionals. He's thorough. I'll give him that. They drove in silence for another 10 minutes. The road grew narrower, less maintained. She saw the turnoff that Stonewall had marked on his map and took it switching from pavement to gravel that crunched beneath the tires. The compound, Brennan said. How many people are we talking about? Security detail plus technical staff. Maybe 6 to 8 total. The operator at the gas station said it varies, but tonight should be light. She paused. Ashcroft wasn't expecting me to survive the cleanup team. He'll be feeling safe right now. Confident. That's our advantage. Our advantage is that he thinks we're dead. Our advantage is that he underestimates everyone who isn't him. It's been his weakness for 30 years. He sends other people to do his killing because he doesn't believe anyone can touch him. Her eyes hardened. Tonight we prove him wrong. The gravel road ended at a locked gate with a faded sign warning against trespassing. Kira pulled the sedan off to the side, concealing it behind a thick stand of pine trees. The dashboard clock read 007. Just over an hour since the gas station. They were making good time. From here we walk, she said. 2 miles through a box canyon, then up a ridge. According to Stonewall's map, there's a back trail that bypasses the main access road. It'll put us on high ground overlooking the compound without triggering any perimeter sensors. They geared up in the darkness. Kira had a go bag in the trunk standard equipment for someone who had learned never to be unprepared. She strapped on a tactical vest, checked the magazine on a compact Sig Sauer P320, and added the MP5 she had taken from Ashcroft's operator to a sling across her chest. Night vision monocular extra magazines, a small first aid kit. The essentials. Brennan had the Glock he had brought to the gas station, plus an extra magazine and a combat knife she handed him from her bag. "Stay close," she said. "Step where I step. Make no noise. When we reach the ridge, I'll scout the compound and identify entry points. You don't move until I give the signal." He nodded. They moved into the darkness. The canyon was narrow and deep, carved over millennia by water that now only trickled through the lowest channels. Kira navigated by starlight and memory, following the trail Stonewall had marked while listening for any sign of perimeter security. The compound was still over a mile ahead, but Ashcroft was paranoid. He might have sensors this far out. Brennan moved well for a contractor. Quiet feet, controlled breathing, no unnecessary motion. Whatever training he had received during his Blackwater years, it had stuck. Danny had moved the same way. She pushed the thought aside. There would be time for grief later. Right now, there was only the mission. They climbed for 40 minutes, switchbacking up a steep slope, covered in loose scree and scrub oak. The air grew thinner with elevation, cold enough that their breath fogged in pale clouds. Her thighs burned from the sustained effort, but she pushed through. This was nothing compared to Hell Week. Nothing compared to the mountains of Afghanistan where she had earned her trident. Finally, they crested the ridge, and there it was. The compound sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by steep cliffs on three sides. From above, it looked like a collection of prefabricated buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire, floodlights mounted on poles at regular intervals. She could see the access road entering from the east, the helicopter pad on the north side. The communications array bristling with antennas. She pulled out the night vision monocular and scanned the perimeter. 4 guards visible, 2 at the main gate, 2 patrolling the fence line in a standard rotation pattern, all armed with rifles, probably M4s. They moved with the casual alertness of men who expected nothing to happen, but were prepared if it did. Inside the compound, lights glowed in 2 of the buildings. The largest structure, 3 stories, probably administrative, and a smaller building near the helicopter pad, windowless, reinforced. That would be the records facility, the place where Ashcroft kept his secrets. She handed the monocular to Brennan. 4 guards outside, unknown number inside. The big building is where Ashcroft operates from. The smaller one is where he keeps his files. Brennan studied the layout for a long moment. His face was unreadable in the darkness. "How do we get in?" "The fence has sensors, motion and pressure, but there's a gap in the coverage near the northwest corner where the cliff face meets the perimeter. The terrain's too steep for standard security equipment." She pointed. "We go down, move along the cliff base, and enter through that gap. Once inside, we split up. You take the administrative building, create a distraction. Draw the guards toward your position, make noise, make them think that's where the threat is. While you go for the files, the records facility will have its own security. Electronic locks, maybe a guard or 2. But if the main force is responding to you, I should have a clear path." And Ashcroft, her jaw tightened. "If I find him, I'll handle him." Brennan lowered the monocular and met her eyes. Even in the darkness, she could see the question forming. Danny would have wanted him to face justice, a trial, public exposure, not a bullet in the dark. "Danny's dead." The words came out harder than she intended. "Justice is whatever I can get." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Let's move." The descent was treacherous. Loose scree shifted beneath her boots with every step, threatening to send cascades of rock tumbling down the cliff face and alert every guard in the compound below. She moved with deliberate patience, testing each foothold before committing her weight using her hands to grip exposed roots and jagged stone outcroppings. Brennan followed the path she carved, matching her movements with the competence of someone who had done this before. Different terrain, different circumstances, but the same fundamental skills. She found herself grudgingly impressed. 300 feet of vertical descent, then another 200 yards of horizontal movement along the cliff base, hugging the rock face where the terrain was too steep for sensors to be practical. The gap in the perimeter coverage was exactly where Stonewall's map had indicated. A narrow corridor where the fence met raw granite, too awkward for standard security equipment. She reached the bottom of the cliff and pressed her back against cold stone, scanning the fence line through her monocular. The two perimeter guards had completed their circuit and were now on the far side of the compound, their flashlight beams visible as distant pinpricks moving away from her position. She signaled Brennan with 2 fingers. "Move up." He materialized beside her, breathing controlled despite the exertion of the climb. His face was a pale smear in the darkness, but his eyes were alert, focused. Whatever doubts he had carried into this mission, they had been transformed into something else. Purpose, resolve. The fence was 10 feet high, topped with concertina wire that gleamed like frozen thorns in the ambient light. But at the point where it met the cliff, there was a gap of perhaps 18 inches, where the installers had been unable to secure the post properly in the rocky soil. 18 inches was enough. She went first, dropped to her stomach and wormed through the gap, feeling the cold bite of chain link against her shoulders, the scrape of wire against the back of her tactical vest. For a moment she was caught trapped between fence and stone, and she felt the familiar flutter of claustrophobic panic that she had learned to suppress years ago during confined space training. Then she was through, rolling to her feet on the other side, weapon, up, scanning for threats. Clear. Brennan followed. He was broader than her, and the gap was tighter for him, but he managed it without sound, emerging on his belly like a snake shedding its skin. He rose beside her, Glock in hand, and waited for instructions. She pointed toward the administrative building. Large structure, 3 stories, windows glowing with interior light. Then she held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. That was how long he had to reach position and initiate the distraction. He nodded, understanding. She touched his shoulder once. A gesture that meant good luck and be careful and don't die, all compressed into a single moment of contact. Then she was moving, flowing through the shadows between floodlights, heading toward the records facility and whatever waited inside. The compound was quieter than she expected. The low hum of generators, the distant murmur of voices from the administrative building, the occasional crackle of a radio as guards checked in with each other. Normal sounds for a facility like this. Routine sounds that suggested no one expected trouble tonight. They were about to be disappointed. She reached the records building and pressed herself against its concrete wall, listening. No sound from inside, no movement, either empty or occupied by people who had no reason to make noise. The door was heavy steel, secured with an electronic keypad, military-grade encryption. She pulled the bypass unit from her vest and pressed it against the keypad, waiting while it cycled through frequency combinations. 8 seconds. 10. 12. The lock clicked open. She slipped inside and pulled the door closed behind her, cutting off the ambient light from outside. Total darkness for a moment, then her eyes adjusted to the faint glow of emergency exit signs at either end of a long corridor. Concrete walls, concrete floor. The smell of antiseptic and old fear. She knew that smell, had encountered it in black sites across 3 continents. Doors lined the corridor, heavy doors with small windows reinforced with wire mesh. Cells, interrogation rooms, the infrastructure of secrets. She moved down the corridor, checking each window. Empty, empty, empty. Whatever operations had been conducted here, they were not active tonight. The facility was on standby, waiting. At the end of the corridor, a final door, different from the others. No window, thicker frame, additional lock. She used the bypass unit again and pushed through into a room that made her breath catch. Files, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, metal shelving units packed with folders, binders, boxes of documents, the physical records that Ashcroft kept separate from any electronic network, the evidence of operations that could never be acknowledged, missions that had never officially occurred, deaths that had been classified and buried. Somewhere in this room was proof of what had happened in Syria, proof that Danny Slade and her teammates had been sacrificed for someone else's agenda, proof that would destroy Ashcroft and everyone who had helped him. She started searching. The filing system was methodical, organized by year and operation codename. She found sections for Desert Wind, Iron Hammer, Crimson Tide, names that meant nothing to her operations she had never been part of. She kept moving fingers, tracing labels until she found what she was looking for. Silent Protocol 2023. 3 thick folders. She pulled them from the shelf and opened the first one, scanning pages in the dim light. Mission briefing documents, intelligence assessments, communication intercepts, and there it was. A memo dated 3 days before the Syria operation, from Colonel Theodore Ashcroft, DIA, to a distribution list that included names she did not recognize, and 2 she did. The memo outlined concerns about the Syrian engineer they were supposed to extract, concerns about what he knew and who he might tell, concerns that his testimony could compromise ongoing operations and expose sensitive partnerships. The final paragraph recommended a solution. Asset extraction should proceed as planned. However, operational parameters should be adjusted to ensure maximum deniability. Team composition should be limited to expendable personnel. Post-extraction protocols should prioritize asset containment over asset security. Expendable personnel. That was how Ashcroft had described her team. That was how he had described Danny Slade. She photographed the memo with her phone, then kept flipping through pages. More documents, more evidence. A complete paper trail of conspiracy and murder, preserved in neat folders like specimens in a museum. The second folder contained after-action reports, falsified intelligence assessments that blamed the ambush on bad Syrian sources rather than deliberate compromise. Medical reports on the engineer's death listing, cause as cardiac arrest signed by a physician who had probably never examined the body. The third folder was different. Personnel files, photos and dossiers on everyone involved in Silent Protocol. Her own face stared up at her from 1 page younger by 2 years, hair shorter, expression harder. Below her photo, a detailed biography, service record, psychological profile. And in the margin, handwritten in blue ink, Ashcroft's notation, primary threat, recommend permanent neutralization upon completion of cover-up. He had been planning to kill her for 18 months. The gas station was not the first attempt, just the most recent. She was photographing the final pages when the explosion shook the building. Brennan. The sound came from the direction of the administrative building. A deep thump followed by the crack of shattering glass and the sudden wail of alarms. Red emergency lights began flashing in the corridor outside, strobing through the door's edges. Her distraction had arrived. She stuffed the folders into her vest, as many pages as she could carry, and moved toward the exit. The corridor was still empty, but she could hear shouting in the distance, boots pounding on concrete, the chaos of men responding to an unexpected threat. She reached the outer door and paused, listening. More shouting, the crack of gunfire. Single shots, not automatic. That meant Brennan was still fighting, still moving. He was buying her time. She slipped outside into a compound transformed by crisis. Guards were running toward the administrative building, weapons, drawn flashlights cutting through smoke that billowed from a first-floor window. The perimeter patrols had abandoned their routes, converging on the visible threat. No one was watching the records facility. She moved in the opposite direction toward the helicopter pad and the fence beyond it. If she could reach the gap where they had entered, she could disappear into the mountains with the evidence. Mission accomplished. But Brennan was still inside. She stopped, caught between mission and conscience. The documents in her vest were enough. More than enough. Evidence that would destroy Ashcroft, expose the conspiracy, vindicate Danny's death. She had what she came for. And Brennan Slade was still in that building, fighting alone against odds she knew were overwhelming. Danny would never forgive her if she left his brother to die. She would never forgive herself. Kira turned and moved toward the administrative building. The front entrance was chaos. Guards clustered near the shattered window, shouting conflicting orders, trying to organize a response to a threat they did not understand. She circled around to the rear of the building, found a service entrance, and slipped inside. The interior was smoke-filled and loud with alarms. She moved through a kitchen area, past storage rooms and empty offices, following the sound of gunfire. A stairwell led upward, and she took it 2 steps at a time, emerging on the second floor into a corridor lined with closed doors. At the far end, she saw him. Brennan was crouched behind an overturned desk, firing controlled shots at 3 guards who had taken cover in doorways on either side of the corridor. Blood soaked through his sleeve from a wound on his left arm, but his grip on the Glock was steady. His face was set with the grim determination of a man who had accepted that he might not survive the night. She announced herself with action. The first guard died before he knew she was there. A shot to the back of the head suppressed, barely audible over the alarms. The second turned at the sound of his partner falling and caught her second round in the throat. The third managed to raise his weapon before she closed the distance, but his rifle was too long for close quarters. Her knife was already in motion. The blade found the gap between his vest and his collar. He went down without a sound. Silence except for the alarms and Brennan's ragged breathing. He stared at her, blood dripping from his arm, eyes wide with something that might have been fear or might have been awe. "I told you to create a distraction," she said, "not get yourself killed. They had more people than we expected. I got pinned down." He grimaced, pressing his good hand against the wound. "Thought you'd be long gone by now. I got what I came for." She moved to his position, checking the injury. Through and through, no arterial damage. He would live if they got out soon. "Now we need to move. Ashcroft." Brennan jerked his head toward a closed door at the end of the corridor. "In there, locked himself in when the shooting started. I heard him on a radio calling for extraction." The helicopter pad. If Ashcroft had a bird coming, they had minutes at most. She moved to the door and examined it. Solid wood standard lock, not reinforced like the ones in the records facility. She stepped back and kicked it just below the handle, feeling the frame splinter. Kicked again. The door flew open. The office beyond was large and well-appointed. Leather furniture, wooden bookshelves, a massive desk dominating the center of the room. And behind that desk, standing with a satellite phone pressed to his ear, was Colonel Theodore Ashcroft. She recognized him immediately. Late 60s, silver hair cropped short the weathered face of a man who had spent decades making decisions that ended lives. He wore civilian clothes, but his posture was military. Spine straight, shoulders back, the bearing of someone accustomed to command. He lowered the phone as she entered, her weapon trained on his center mass. "Petty Officer Vance." His voice was calm, almost conversational. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me." She did not respond to his greeting. The Sig Sauer remained steady in her hand's muzzle, aligned with the center of his chest. 10 feet of distance between them. Close enough for accuracy, far enough for reaction time. The mathematics of violence calculated in the span of a heartbeat. Ashcroft set the satellite phone on his desk with deliberate care. His movements were slow and threatening. The movements of a man who understood exactly how close he was to death and had decided that panic would not improve his odds. "The files," he said, gesturing toward the bulge beneath her tactical vest. "You have them. I can see that. Evidence of my crimes, my conspiracies, my sins." He tilted his head slightly. "Is that what you came for?" "Among other things." Behind her, Brennan entered the office. His Glock was raised, his wounded arm pressed against his side. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage she had applied in the corridor, but his eyes were clear-focused. He moved to flank Ashcroft from the left, creating a crossfire that left the colonel with no angle of escape. Ashcroft noted the positioning with a slight nod. Professional appreciation for professional tactics. "The brother," he said, studying Brennan. "I should have known you would find each other eventually. Grief makes strange alliances." "You used me." Brennan's voice was ice. "Pointed me at her like a weapon. I gave you an opportunity for justice. What you did with it was your choice." "Justice?" The word came out as a snarl. "You got my brother killed. You sent him into a trap and watched him die. That's not justice. That's murder." Ashcroft's expression did not change. "Your brother was a contractor. He understood the risks. He signed the same waivers everyone signs when they enter this world. His death was unfortunate, but it was not personal. It was personal to me. Then you should have pulled the trigger at the gas station." Ashcroft's eyes moved to Kira. "But you didn't. And now here we are." The distant thump of helicopter rotors reached them through the office windows. Getting closer. His extraction was incoming. "You called for backup," Kira said. "Standard protocol. When an asset comes under attack, reinforcements are dispatched. They'll be here in approximately 4 minutes. He smiled thinly. You could kill me before then, of course, but then you would never know the full truth. And you want the truth, don't you, petty officer? That's what has driven you all these months. Not revenge, not justice, truth. She hated that he was right. Talk fast. Ashcroft settled into his chair, hands visible on the desk, the posture of a man preparing to negotiate. Silent protocol was not my operation, he said. I managed it, yes. I signed the orders. But the directive came from above, far above. People whose names you would recognize, whose faces appear on television screens and newspaper front pages. He paused. The Syrian engineer you were sent to extract knew things that could have toppled governments, not just ours. Our allies, our partners, the entire architecture of relationships we've spent decades building in the Middle East. So you sacrificed my team to protect your political friends. I sacrificed 6 people to prevent a war that would have killed 6 million. His voice hardened. That's the calculus of intelligence work, petty officer. You spent 9 years in special operations. You know how this game is played. Sometimes pawns have to be sacrificed to protect the king. Danny Slade was not a pawn. Everyone is a pawn, including you, including me. He leaned forward slightly. The people I serve don't care about individual lives. They care about outcomes, stability, the preservation of systems that have kept the world from burning for the past 70 years. Your team was a small price to pay for that. Kira felt her finger tightening on the trigger. It would be so easy, one shot, end the man who had ordered the deaths of everyone she had served with in Syria, end the conspiracy that had haunted her for 18 months. But something in his words stopped her. The people you serve, she repeated. Who are they? That's the question, isn't it? Ashcroft smiled again, but there was no warmth in it. Kill me and you'll never know. You'll have your revenge, your moment of satisfaction. But the machine will keep running. Someone else will take my place. Someone else will make the same decisions I made, sign the same orders, sacrifice the same pawns. Nothing will change. And if I let you live, then we can make a deal. The files you're carrying are valuable, but they're incomplete. They show what I did, but not who ordered it. Not the full scope of the network that made silent protocol possible. He paused. I can give you names, dates, evidence that goes all the way to the top. Enough to tear down the entire structure, not just one colonel in a mountain bunker. Brennan stepped forward. Don't listen to him. He's stalling. The helicopter is 3 minutes away, yes. Ashcroft's eyes never left Kira's. 3 minutes for you to decide what kind of justice you really want. The quick kind that ends with my body on this floor, or the thorough kind that brings down everyone responsible. The helicopter was closer now. She could feel the building vibrating with the downdraft. Why would you give up your own people? Because I'm a survivor, petty officer. I've spent 30 years in this business, and I've learned one essential truth. Loyalty flows upward, never down. The people I serve will sacrifice me the moment I become inconvenient. They're probably already planning it. My death at your hands would be a neat solution to their problems. A rogue colonel killed by a vengeful operator. Case closed. No further investigation required. So you want to burn them before they burn you. I want to live. If that means giving you what you need to destroy them, so be it. We both get what we want. Kira studied him, looking for the lie beneath the offer, the trap hidden in the negotiation. Ashcroft was a manipulator. Everything he said was calculated to produce a specific outcome. But that did not mean he was lying. Sometimes the most effective manipulation was telling the truth. The name's going to Hana, she said. Give me one. Proof that you're not just buying time. Ashcroft hesitated. For the first time since she had entered the room, something flickered in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or the recognition that he was about to cross a line he could never uncross. Senator William Hartley, he said quietly, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He authorized silent protocol personally. His signature is on a document I keep in a safe in this office, a document that would end his career and send him to prison for the rest of his life. A senator. She had suspected the conspiracy reached high, but not that high. Show me. Ashcroft rose slowly, hands still visible. He moved toward a painting on the wall behind his desk, a landscape of mountains that looked nothing like the ones outside. He swung the painting aside to reveal a small safe with a digital keypad. The combination is... Stop. He froze. Kira moved around the desk, keeping her weapon trained on him. She positioned herself where she could see both the safe and his hands, eliminating any angle for a surprise move. Open it slowly. Any sudden movements, and I put a round through your spine. He nodded and entered the combination. The safe clicked open. Inside, she could see documents. A leather folder thick with papers, and beside it, a small pistol. A Walther PPK, compact and deadly. "Don't," she said. Ashcroft's hand had been moving toward the weapon. He stopped, fingers hovering inches from the grip. "I wasn't going to." "Yes, you were." She stepped closer, close enough to press the Sig Sauer's muzzle against the base of his skull. "Take the folder. Leave the gun. Try anything else and your brains will be decorating that painting." He took the folder. She stepped back, maintaining distance, and gestured for him to place it on the desk. He complied, then raised his hands again. Brennan moved to the desk and opened the folder while Kira kept Ashcroft covered. She watched Brennan's face as he scanned the documents inside. Watched his expression change from suspicion to shock to cold fury. "It's real," he said. "Signatures, dates, everything. Hartley plus 3 other names I recognize. A deputy director at CIA, a general at JSOC, and someone at the State Department." He looked up. "This goes all the way to the top." The helicopter was very close now. Through the window, she could see it descending toward the pad. Black against the darker sky, no markings visible. 2 figures were already emerging from the cabin, armed, moving toward the building. Reinforcements. More of Ashcroft's private soldiers? She had seconds to decide. "Take the folder," she told Brennan. "Get to the extraction point. I'll be right behind you." "What about him?" She looked at Ashcroft. At the man who had killed Danny Slade and 3 other operators. At the architect of Silent Protocol and a dozen other bloody conspiracies. At someone who deserved to die more than anyone she had ever met. "He's coming with us." Ashcroft's eyebrows rose. "A prisoner. A witness. You're going to testify to everything. Every operation, every order, every death. And when you're done, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing that the world knows exactly what you are. The people in that helicopter will kill you before you reach the fence. Let me worry about that." She grabbed his arm and pushed him toward the door. "Move." They went down the back stairwell, Brennan leading Kira, pushing Ashcroft ahead of her, with the Sig Sauer pressed against his kidney. The building was still chaos. Alarms wailing, smoke filling the corridors. Guards shouting confused orders as they tried to respond to multiple threats simultaneously. They reached the ground floor and exited through a service door into the courtyard. The helicopter had landed. She could see the rotors still spinning, the 2 operators advancing toward the administrative building with weapons raised. They had not seen her yet. The angle was wrong, the chaos too distracting. "The fence," she said. "Northwest corner. Same gap we came through." Brennan nodded and moved out, staying low, using the shadows between floodlights as cover. Kira followed, dragging Ashcroft with her. The colonel was cooperating for now. He understood that his survival depended on hers, at least until they were clear of the compound. They were 50 feet from the fence when someone shouted behind them. She did not turn to look, did not slow down, just pushed Ashcroft harder and picked up her pace, sprinting for the gap in the perimeter. Gunfire erupted. Rounds snapped past her head, close enough that she felt the displaced air. She shoved Ashcroft to the ground and returned fire, 3 shots aimed at the muzzle flashes behind her. One of the operators went down, the other took cover. "Go!" she shouted at Brennan. "Get him through the fence!" Brennan grabbed Ashcroft and hauled him toward the gap. The colonel resisted for a moment, then seemed to realize that his choices were escape with them or die in the crossfire. He stopped struggling. Kira laid down, covering fire as they moved. The remaining operator was pinned behind a generator housing, unable to advance without exposing himself. More guards were responding, but they were coming from the administrative building, still 60 seconds away. 60 seconds was enough. She reached the fence as Brennan was pulling Ashcroft through the gap. She dropped to her stomach and wormed through after them, feeling the scrape of chain link against her vest, the bite of wire against her shoulders. Then she was through, rolling to her feet on the other side, weapon up, scanning for pursuit. The operator who had been pinned behind the generator was moving toward the fence. She fired twice and he dropped. "Move," she said. "Up the cliff. Don't stop until you reach the ridge." They climbed. The ascent was brutal. Gravity fighting them with every step, loose rock, threatening to send them tumbling back toward the compound. Ashcroft was struggling, his civilian shoes inadequate for the terrain, his desk-bound body unused to this kind of exertion. But fear was a powerful motivator. He kept climbing. Behind them, flashlight beams were sweeping the cliff base. Shouts echoed up the rock face, distorted by wind and distance. The hunt was beginning, but they were ahead of it. Barely, but enough. They crested the ridge as the first pursuers reached the fence. Kira paused for a moment, looking back at the compound, at the buildings where she had found the evidence that would destroy Ashcroft and everyone who had helped him, at the helicopter pad where reinforcements were still arriving too late to stop what had already happened. Then she turned and followed Brennan and Ashcroft down the far side of the ridge, into the darkness toward whatever waited at the end of this night. The drive back took longer than the drive in. Kira kept to back roads, avoiding the main highways, where police or Ashcroft's remaining forces might be watching. The sedan wound through mountain passes and desert valleys, headlights cutting through a darkness that was beginning to fade at the edges. Dawn was coming, a new day. Ashcroft sat in the back seat, hands zip-tied in front of him, silent. He had not spoken since they left the compound. His face was unreadable in the rearview mirror, but she could see him thinking, calculating, looking for an angle, an opportunity, a way to turn this situation to his advantage. She would not give him one. Brennan sat beside her in the passenger seat, the folder of documents clutched in his lap like a lifeline. His wounded arm had been properly bandaged, now the bleeding stopped. He would need a hospital eventually, but not yet. Not until they were somewhere safe, if such a place existed anymore. At Joe 734, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number, but the pattern of digits was familiar. Law enforcement prefix. She answered. "This is Deputy Royce Kellerman, San Miguel County Sheriff's Department. Am I speaking with Kira Vance?" She considered hanging up, considered ignoring the call and disappearing before anyone could trace her location. But running from local police would only complicate things. Better to know what they knew. Speaking. "Ma'am, I'm calling about the incident at the Chevron station on Route 19 last night. Mr. Briggs gave us your contact information." A pause. "He also gave us a very interesting statement about what happened." "I'm sure he did. Ma'am, when we ran your identification through federal databases, we got some unusual results." Kellerman's voice had changed, more respectful, more careful. "Your file came back with a DOD flag, SEAL 309 Bravo Protocol. It says here you're not to be detained without command oversight." Kira closed her eyes briefly. So much for anonymity. "That's correct. Ma'am, I've been in law enforcement for 23 years. Served in Somalia with the Rangers before that. I've never seen a flag like this on a civilian." He paused again. "Whatever you did at that gas station, whatever you're involved in, it's above my pay grade. I just wanted you to know that the two men from the SUV are in federal custody now. Someone from Langley picked them up an hour ago." Langley, CIA. The web was wider than she had thought. And the situation at the station, closed as far as we're concerned. Mr. Briggs filed his statement. Robbery attempt, 2 suspects, deceased, Good Samaritan assisted. No charges pending. "Thank you, Deputy. One more thing." His voice dropped. "The federal agents who took those men, they asked about you. Asked where you went, who you were with. I told them I didn't know." A beat of silence. "That was the truth, but I got the feeling they already knew anyway." The line went dead. She set the phone down and stared at the road ahead. The investigation was already beginning. Ashcroft's cleanup crew was in federal custody. Her name was circulating through intelligence channels. The clock was ticking faster than she had anticipated. At Neo 8112, they stopped at a roadside diner for coffee and supplies. Brennan went inside while Kira stayed in the car, with Ashcroft engine running, weapon ready. The colonel had not moved, had not spoken, had not done anything except breathe and think. "You know this won't end the way you want," he said finally. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "What way is that?" "Justice, exposure, the truth coming out and the guilty being punished." He shook his head slowly. "The people I serve have been covering up operations like silent protocol for decades. They have resources you can't imagine. They'll bury your evidence, discredit your witnesses, make the whole story disappear before anyone of consequence even hears it. Maybe. Then why not just kill me? Take your revenge and disappear. It's cleaner, simpler, and honestly, it's what I deserve. She met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Because I'm not like you. Something flickered in his expression. Fear, perhaps, or the recognition of a strength he could not understand. Brennan returned with coffee and sandwiches. They ate in silence as the car moved again, heading east now, toward a destination she had not yet revealed. At 8:47, the phone buzzed again. This time she recognized the number. Stonewall's gas station. "You're alive," the old Marine said. "I was starting to wonder." "We're alive. We have the evidence. And we have Ashcroft." Silence on the other end. Then, "You captured him. He's in my back seat, hands tied, mouth shut, very unhappy about both." Stonewall was quiet for a moment. Then, "I heard from some old contacts this morning. Word is spreading through certain channels. A DIA colonel with some very dirty laundry about to become very public." "How public?" "Congressional inquiry public. Inspector General investigation public. The kind of public that makes people like him start looking for non-extradition countries." Stonewall paused. "You did good, sailor. Danny Slade would be proud." The words hit harder than she expected. She had to take a breath before responding. "Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. This fight isn't over. It's just moving to a different battlefield." His voice dropped. "Watch your six, Vance. Men like Ashcroft don't go quietly. He's got years of favors to call in bodies buried that people want to stay buried. You just made yourself the most dangerous person in his world." "I know." "Good. Then you know to be ready." She ended the call and looked at Brennan, who was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What happens now?" he asked. "We make copies of everything. The documents, the photographs, Ashcroft's confession. We distribute them to people who can use them. Journalists, investigators, congressional contacts. We create so many sources that burying it becomes impossible. And then we disappear for a while. Let the system work. Let the investigations run their course. And if the system fails, if they bury it anyway." She glanced in the rear-view mirror where Ashcroft sat in silence, his face unreadable. "Then we come back, and we finish it ourselves." Brennan nodded slowly. It was not the clean ending he had wanted, not the simple justice of a bullet through Ashcroft's skull, but it was something, a chance, a path forward. "Danny would have approved," he said quietly, "of the way you handled it, not killing him when you had the chance." "Maybe. He would have." Brennan's voice cracked slightly. "He always said you were the best of us, the one who remembered why we fought even when the rest of us forgot." She did not answer. Could not answer, because the weight of that praise from a dead man through his living brother was too heavy to acknowledge while she was still driving. At 9:23, they reached their destination, a small airfield outside of Santa Fe, private and discreet. She had contacts here, people who owed her favors, who asked no questions and kept no records. A plane was waiting, fueled, and ready, pilots standing by. They transferred Ashcroft from the car to the aircraft. He went without resistance, his earlier defiance replaced by a weary acceptance. He knew he was beaten, knew that the machine he had served for 30 years had already begun to distance itself from him. He was a liability, now a loose end that would be cut one way or another. Better to be a witness than a corpse. At 09:41, they were airborne. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains fell away beneath them, their peaks touched by morning light. The desert spread out in all directions, vast and ancient, and indifferent to the small dramas of human beings and their endless wars. Kira watched the landscape scroll past and felt something she had not felt in 18 months. Peace, not the absence of conflict. She knew there would be more battles ahead. The people Ashcroft served would not surrender their power without a fight. There would be attempts to discredit her, to silence her, to make her disappear. The war was far from over, but for the first time since Syria, she felt like she was winning. At 09:58, her phone buzzed one final time. This call was different. A blocked number, but the pattern of rings was deliberate. 3 short, 2 long, 3 short. A code she had not used since leaving the teams. She answered but did not speak. A voice she had never heard before spoke 3 words. Silent protocol activated. The line went dead. She stared at the phone for a long moment, mind racing. Silent protocol. The name of the operation that had killed Danny Slade. The name on the folders in her vest. And now apparently something more. What is it? Brennan asked. I don't know. She looked out the window at the desert below, at the mountains behind them, at the endless sky stretching in all directions. But I think we're about to find out. In the back of the plane, Colonel Theodore Ashcroft sat in silence. His eyes closed, his face unreadable. Whatever he was thinking, whatever he knew about the words that had just been spoken, he gave no sign. The plane flew east, carrying them toward a future none of them could predict. Behind them, the sun rose over the New Mexico desert, painting the rocks red and gold and orange. A new day, a new chapter. And somewhere in the shadows, forces were moving. Plans were being made, decisions that would shape everything that came next. She did not say yes. She did not say no. Because when a Navy SEAL has spent her entire life in the shadows, sometimes silence is not surrender. It is the sound of someone loading the next round.